Good afternoon. I'm just going to slowly let everyone join. I'm very excited today because I think this is our largest Champions Program gathering of all time, albeit virtual. We have more than 230 registrants today. So this is going to be a wonderful program. Hopefully everybody can stick with us as long as possible throughout the whole program. So I am going to move us forward. For those that don't know me, I'm Danielle Casey. I'm the Executive Vice President here with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. Again, thank you all for joining us for our special edition GSEC Champions Training Program. We're going to take you through a lot of material today, but just very quickly on housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded, so no worries if you miss anything, or if you're so excited you want to share it with somebody later, you can definitely do so. For following the program, we'll be sharing a link to that recording along with a brief survey so we can see how we did. If you have technical issues or general questions, or at some points in the program, we may be asking you to give us feedback using the chat function, please use the chat function. If you have questions for a speaker specifically, please use the Q&A function. That'll allow us to track those questions later and make sure everything's answered either during the program or as a follow-up. And with that, Olivia, if you can post on the screen very quickly while I introduce the supervisor, our first poll question of the day. We want to get a sense of what everyone is looking forward to the most in today's program. So if anyone wants to please answer that poll, hopefully all of our attendees are seeing that poll. Are you most excited about learning about our value proposition for the region, hearing about the recovery plan, learning about the airport, or hearing from a panel of experts? And this is not to create competition among all of our speakers today, but we're just excited to see what you're excited about. All right, well, with that, while you all answer that, Olivia can put up the results here in just a few minutes. But it's my pleasure to introduce District 1 Supervisor Phil Cerna to kick off today's program. He has served on the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors representing District 1 since June of 2010. Cerna focuses on a wide range of issues, including health and social services, such as mental and indigent health care, as well as protective services for children and families and the elderly. He is also focused on public safety, enhancing the environment, and routinely works to secure the flood protection and to protect and improve the American River Parkway. In addition to his service on the Board of Supervisors, he participates on a number of other boards and commissions. More to name, but let's just throw out a few. Chairing the Sacramento First 5 Commission, serving on the board of Sac Regional Transit, Sac Area Flood Control District, Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District, Sacramento Solid Waste Authority, and Sacramento Library Authority, just to name a few. Don't say those any faster than I just tried, or you're going to tongue twist. So with that, it is all yours, and thank you for joining us, Supervisor.
Great. Thank you, Danielle, for the kind introduction. And first and foremost, I have to apologize for my hair. I think like so many others, we are eagerly waiting our opportunity to get a haircut in the next, for the, to keep us at least good for the next 2 months, right? So I'd like to welcome you all and thank everyone for joining us for today's Champions Program. The Sacramento County Champions Program was originally scheduled to take place in person back in April, but it's more important now than ever to continue these conversations and work collaboratively to advance our region's economy. The program is designed to position regional leaders as change agents within the Greater Sacramento region. During today's program, we will hear from GSEC's Danielle Casey, who you just heard from. She will cover various economic development principles and activities in our region, followed by GSEC CEO Barry Broom, who will dive into the council's economic recovery strategy. We are also joined today by Mark Haneke with the Sacramento International Airport, who will discuss the impacts that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the travel industry and discuss how we can best leverage our international airport during the recovery. Then finally, we are going to hear from a panel of regional leaders who will provide their insights about the future of our region, along with best practices as we begin reopening the local and regional economies. This is also an opportunity to ask plenty of questions. So as we continue to do everything that we can individually and collectively to limit virus transmission and save lives, it remains critical that we stay connected. Our resiliency here in Sacramento and our region is what sets us apart from other places, and we will get through this and thrive as a fully invested community that is committed to equitable social and economic success. So now, without further delay, I'd like to pass it back over to Danielle. And again, thanks for having me be part of the program today.
All right. Well, thank you so much. All right, there's my headshot. I'm glad it's a black and white, or I'm not wearing the same outfit. I've had that happen before when I was presenting. Like, that's a blue suit day. All right. So for those of you that are familiar with our Champions program, hopefully we're getting some repeat visitors, because our standard Champions program training and material certainly does not exist anymore in its previous form. Obviously, the whole world has changed. So it's wild times that we're in. But I am going to take you through some of the core economic development processes and principles that we follow and live by. And so that anyone here listening and is going, I wonder, what is GSEC's role anyway? How does a regional economic development group operate? Who are you working with? Who are you talking to? We want everyone to leave today as somewhat of economic development disciples. And so this is a little bit of your Economic Development 101 crash course. I also want to point out, I'm super excited. We have such a slate of attendees today. We've got people from Black Pine Communities, Sacramento State, a great contingent from Experis. We've got people from the Sutter Buttes Business Services Group, DSP Global, Yuba Water, My Flora DNA, and Zippy, some of our local companies that are entering the market. SMUD, UC Davis, has a great group. The SAC Business Journal is even with us today, at least as long as they logged in, they were registered. And the Hard Rock Casino, along with a lot of brokerage partners, Cushman & Wakefield, Colliers, Newmark, Knight Frank, and I'm sure others that I didn't even notice. So just giving everybody a sampling of who is around. And again, feel free to say hi to each other in chat as we go along. All right, so if you're not familiar with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, this is just a little bit of a reminder who we even are. We are a public-private partnership. We're about 80% privately funded, and then the balance is public. We have 43 CEOs on our board, and then we have representation from communities around the region, all 6 counties, and an additional 14 municipalities. Our goal is to retain businesses, attract businesses, grow them, grow jobs, investment, and develop industries. So we'll talk quite a bit more later about the criticality of business retention now in the new world that we're in as well. Our partners truly do drive our organizational success. We have several different advisory groups that work with us internal to GSEC and help us make decisions and strategize. So when we talk about the strategies that we're bringing forward, these aren't developed in a vacuum, but they're developed through a tremendous amount of input, discussion, and advice and guidance in and with our executive board and with all of our communities that are involved. One is our Competitiveness Council. This is a wonderful advisory group that helps advise our board of directors on strategic direction. They work through issues and challenges with us, talk through them, and then help us vet them out before we bring them to the full board. We also have industry advisory councils, one specifically on food and agriculture that's been around for a while. We have just launched a business development advancement council, which are a lot of different businesses representing that are firms that help businesses as they locate, enter the market, and get situated. So think about staffing firms, human resources support firms, construction agencies and builders, etc. We have our Champions program. So all of you that are here today that are going, what the heck is a champion? This is it. Creating awareness and education among the entire region about what we do and helping you all speak about the region and promote Greater Sacramento in a way that's going to help drive our economy forward. And then also we have an Economic Development Directors Task Force. This is made up of an economic development staff representative from each of our communities in the region. We meet generally monthly, but during the COVID situation, we've been meeting weekly to update everyone, to share information, and work back and forth to make sure that we're on the same page, and even more importantly, find out what our communities need and how we can help them. Internal in our organization from a staffing perspective, there are kind of three main areas that we focus on and that we're doing work in. So if you wonder what our 15 or so plus or minus staff and maybe some interns are doing at any one point, it's one of these key pieces. We're working on engagement. So I just talked about all of our panels and partners. We're engaging the local community, working within the region so we can spread the word, but also get feedback and guidance on what we need to do to improve the economy. We do a ton of marketing and PR, and quite a bit that you won't always see. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Some of our target audiences aren't necessarily our local folks, but we also have a lot of work to do in educating the local region. We do research. Nothing we do is not based in data. So everything is data focused and data centric, and that's how we come up with all of our value propositions and our work. And as you'll see, the folks that we interact with expect our data to be accurate, as they should, and that's how they're basing their decisions that they're advising clients on nationally. And then again, business development work. This is a huge core piece on lead generation strategies. It also ties in specifically to our marketing, but this has to do with prospect handling, deal closing, and then also ultimately job creation. So I'm going to talk to you about the building blocks as a traditional economic development practitioner. And my background takes me from having worked in museums and other nonprofits to finding myself in a setting with a local municipality where I've worked at 2 different municipalities for 15 plus years, running economic development offices, building them really from scratch. And so if you decide you ever want to be an economic developer, you're going to have to do these 5 things. You're going to have to identify your strengths and weaknesses, create a value proposition, develop your brand and your marketing, figure out how to prospect, and then bring companies in and close the deals, and then finally keep them in your community and help them grow and expand and thrive. So I'm just going to walk these through you as quickly as possible, but so that you will learn a little bit about what it is that we're doing. So again, identifying our strengths and weaknesses, a little bit of a primer. Barry is going to take you through this in great detail and talk to you about what it means now and what it means for our recovery strategy. So this is just a little bit of a teaser, hearkening back to coming out of the 2008 recession. We looked at data and worked with the Brookings Institution, a very well-respected national think tank, and found out that compared to the 100 largest US metros, our MSA was lagging in job growth and output significantly. We were one of the last communities to come out of the Great Recession. And as you see on the screen, there was a lot of reasons for that. And while a lot of people felt pretty good and have been feeling pretty good in the early teens, 13, 14, 15, 16, there's still a tremendous amount of struggling people out there. With 1/3 of our region's residents living in a struggling family, there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. And that was all pre-COVID. So imagine what we're up against now, right? I don't think anybody sees it as a small feat. Some of the other regional economic challenges that still do persist. We finished dead last in business friendliness, so that wasn't a good sign. This was a few years ago, but it was also noted in the same article that's quoting this out of the SACB that our best grade in this survey was a C in the ease of hiring. So we were kind of getting average to low rankings at best in being able to hire people. And at the time, that was seen as a positive scorecard, showing the abundance of professional talent. We've come again a long way from there, but those are things that caused a lot of alarm and concern. And as Barry will talk to you about later, were a huge piece of the whole reason for the new model for Greater Sacramento through the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. We also have a predominance of government jobs. When you look at other cities that are state capitals, we are highly dependent and have been highly dependent on government positions. Now, this has changed a little bit in the wake of COVID, where some of those traditional sectors are creating a more resilient and balanced economy. However, all of the economic challenges we're seeing ultimately will impact government jobs because of government revenue. We also saw with the Brookings study, annual employment growth in tradable sectors being very low. This is critical because tradable sector jobs bring in net new revenue into the community. They have generally a higher multiplier rate, obviously, and we'll show you that a little bit later, but very important when you're growing an economy and growing industries. So this is something that we've worked very hard to combat, and all of the value and data propositions we've put together are helping to educate and bring more businesses in to combat those issues and change that number. So how do you go about creating a data-driven value proposition? Well, first you look for facts and figures that paint your community in a positive light. And when we really dug in and started searching very reliable sources, doing our own data analysis, we found some pretty cool things. Sacramento is the #1 fastest growing large community in California. It is the #1 in women founded businesses in the nation. And we actually found this out while we were doing a joint report with CBRE so that we could help promote the region and analyze the economy from a talent perspective, because we were told by consultants nationally and specifically in the Bay Area that they didn't quite believe us when we said we had amazing talent. So we worked with CBRE to really put together amazing information. If you want to ever see that, go to thetalentishere.com. It's a special landing page with all of that information on our joint report, which has gotten some great traction for us. And #3 city in the US for most net millennial in migration. Again, I think when outside of California and even within California, but outside Greater Sacramento, we do not have a reputation for being attractive and sexy to a millennial population, but the numbers don't lie when you start looking at the census data and the migration data. So I'm just going to keep moving on and also point out that while we hear a lot externally about where everyone from the Bay Area is moving and that everyone is leaving California with their wheels on fire, can't get out fast enough, what we are finding is that's not accurate. More people are moving from the Bay Area to Greater Sacramento every year than Denver, Austin, and Seattle combined. So we are the top destination for Bay Area refugees, so to speak. And then our median age in Greater Sacramento is decreasing. This is positive from the standpoint of companies looking for a long-term workforce that they can hire, train, and grow. We want to see a population median age that is lowering. It also shows and indicates that it's very attractive to millennial populations, which are going to be our workforce for quite some time as we see some of our boomers start to leave and probably leave in droves when that happens. So. And we're also a very, very racially diverse community, which is a tremendous positive for companies that are looking for diversity in perspectives, culture, thought, and skills. I think we all know about our competitive cost of living, but not everyone outside Greater Sacramento knows this. This is information that we'd love you all to be championing and sharing and talking about a cost of living index. And then, I think San Francisco is on this chart. I think everyone knows that, but I don't know that everyone is aware that we're practically neck and neck with Austin and Chicago. Chicago is a major hub, lots of opportunity, lots of great businesses, but when they're thinking about us in comparison to those communities, I don't know that they recognize that immediately. We're also fairly neck and neck with Salt Lake City, for example. We do offer cost of living advantages to competing markets. And then we started thinking about, all right, what are the populations that they're actually looking at? Well, one thing that you have to think about, and I myself am somebody who migrated in from another state that's known to be a low cost state and a low cost of living state, from Arizona. And what I found is, yes, the cost of housing is slightly higher, but you can absolutely find wonderful bang for your buck here. Because California's property tax is capped at 1% due to Prop 13, I haven't really seen any significant notable changes in overall cost of living. Again, it always depends on where you want to be in the region and what you want to have. But we also started looking at millennial neighborhood rental prices so that companies can really get a great sense of, if I'm trying to attract a talent base that wants to live in a very hip, trendy urban core like Sacramento has, what's that going to look like? And again, those comparisons are very interesting. Again, very close to Austin, really not tremendously above Phoenix, and clearly well below what we're seeing in Los Angeles. Moving forward, we all know that we have a highly competitive talent pipeline, but we want to make sure that everyone out there is also really championing and speaking to the fact that we have a massive amount of talented individuals enrolled in a four-year university. We're nearly 400,000 with a 100-mile radius, and we do need to be claiming Berkeley, William Jessup, Los Rios, and all of these different institutions that aren't automatically thought of when people think about, would we go to Greater Sacramento? What kind of education and what kind of students are coming out of those universities? We also stack up. We actually do stack up. We have the ability to model out what it's going to cost for a company to come in. And this looks at everything from employee payroll to benefits to estimated building lease payments, looking at rates that are happening in the market, to property tax costs. And when you stack us up to these other communities, we are a competitive place to operate in and do business. And of course, Not stealing any thunder, I think, at all. And, I'll just kind of even skip over the slide and let Mark talk about at full operation levels how amazing and impressive our international airport is, what a huge draw it is, and what a critical factor it is for businesses choosing to locate within our region. We're also a profitable state to do business in. So what we tell companies is that, yes, you may have higher cost in California and you may have a different business operational climate and other things that you need to tackle, but you're going to be more profitable here because of your connection to innovation, because of your connection and your ability to operate in the state that is really the leader in everything. I think it was even on the Today Show this morning, right? Where California goes, so the nation follows. But looking at Fortune 500 headquarters, we're the second state, the number 2 ranked in terms of all of the numbers, and then looking at their profitability, extremely strong. And we're seeing our capital network grow. This is very important. We have tremendous access to Bay Area capital, but we also have capital happening and growing at about over 800 million in aggregate in our region available. While we're not seeing the number of deals in the last few months, we know a lot of folks, Barry may speak to it, are sitting on capital in the San Francisco Bay Area. There are funds out there and there's funds to be invested. And that investment has been increasing in regional firms in the Greater Sacramento market. In fact, a 57% increase in the number of investment deals in the region since 2015, and a ton of additional investors investing in firms in Greater Sacramento. So we are moving in the right direction. Talking about our brand development, right? One of the things that we have been dealing with for a long time, and definitely since GSEC's inception, are the fact that California and our state has had its story told by others. When we're hearing rankings that really aren't accurate and true, when we've actually dug into these things, these are definitely statistics that were not fully fact checked. When we look at our 50th worst state for doing business. Well, who's ranking that? It's a survey from people who have never done business here. But then we're also seeing other governors talking about the challenges in California, and that has been the headline, and that's been the wrong headline for California. And we've been working very hard to get our own headlines so we can start to combat that. It does take time. But some of the things we do then are positioning. We're positioning for impact on all levels. Obviously, we're working on global positioning. We spend a tremendous amount of time visiting and meeting with consulates, which is wonderful because they're in our backyard. Most countries that have consulate offices in the US have a presence in the Bay Area. We work nationally, educating on the California option. Greater Sacramento is your option for a California presence. Mega regionally, our jobs do matter in California, and it's critical that we keep companies here and grow them rather than allow them to continue to be picked off and brought out of our region. We work very closely, for example, with the Bay Area Council. They fully understand that it makes so much more sense for a company that is having challenges for operation or is growing too fast to continue to be able to do so profitably in the Bay Area to relocate into Greater Sacramento as opposed to leaving the state. And then again, regionally, one of the things we've just kicked off is the We Are Greater Sac hashtag, really to promote our region, to celebrate our region. We've done so with a tremendous amount of testimonials and different media pieces. And so we're really excited about that. And that also piggybacks with us now finally being able to swap our website URL to greatersacramento.com, which was not available until recently for us to purchase. So these are just some examples of different marketing pieces that we put out. Business Expansion Journal speaks directly to site selection consultants and C-suite decision makers. We're really pleased about our soccer announcement. We just recently conducted and completed a white paper on how that draws a connection to millennials and then Gen Zers that are much more interested in soccer than any other sport. So I think that's going to be a tremendous draw for workforce in the future. And we conduct familiarization tours with national site selection consultants, albeit those have gone virtual now as well. Bringing folks out here for an in-person physical tour of our community, there is really nothing better than letting them see it with boots on the ground, although we do feel that we've done a great job by doing this virtually. And then this is just an example of some of the outreach that we will send to national consultants around the country that are really the folks that are influencing and leading and guiding clients on some of the biggest relocation decisions in the country. some of the relocation, the recovery messaging campaigns that we're putting out there. And one of the reasons we want you all to be champions, and so that you will participate in these messaging campaigns, that you'll get on board and help push these out through social media and other methods. But we are going to be working on a comprehensive marketing strategy that is already being rolled out and that will continue to be rolled out as we step further into recovery and reopening mode. But International Economic Development Council has an Economic Development Week, which was in May. So we were really pushing this hard during that week and had a lot of our CEOs talking about why they love to operate in the region. So that's going to be our Greater Sac bounce back. To put a little bit of, I guess, make a little bit of lemonade out of the lemons, one of the things that we have seen as COVID has kind of come upon us is a tremendous amount of media impact. So we've had a lot of visibility out there. So while we've been working from home and working remotely and doing a lot of virtual communication, we have absolutely been heard loud and clear. And I think, you know, all of the numbers here today are a big testament to that, with, you know, well over 100 into the mid hundreds live online right now. Huge broadcast media reach, a lot of open rates there. And then, you know, if you look at all that, it would cost about 1.4 million to buy what we've been able to generate in visibility in the last 2 months. So how do we do all this, right? How do we do lead and prospect development? And I'm going to talk to you about the traditional way we do these things. And then Barry's going to talk to you about how a lot of that is now completely 180'd or up on its end, and we're focusing on different strategies. But we do work on primary client location services, and this will still continue and always be a core service. We help companies that are exploring the region that we have identified through a variety of sources. Those could be companies that reached out through GoBiz through our state. They could be direct referrals to us from a community or a client or another partner. In large part, they do come from partnerships with site selection consultants as well as commercial real estate brokerages. And then there's a huge piece of work that we do researching and identifying companies that for a number of different reasons we see are on the verge of growth, either because they've been acquired or they're conducting some mergers or they've received venture capital funding, etc. So we do our own cold lead gen and also get referrals from a number of sources and type partners. But we work on providing access to talent, creating capacity, and then figuring out what their needs are and their options are and working them through that and helping them get to a final location within our region. And these are some of the things that we always look at. Every year, Area Development Magazine does do a survey of site selection consultants and then also corporate leaders. And as you see, when we look at labor, availability of skilled labor and labor costs, this has continued to increase in rank and stay at the top of the rank for, I would say, the last 7 to 8 years. And as we will continue to discuss today, even with COVID, the type of talent and what we need for talent is going to be shifting. The way we deliver that talent is going to be shifting. But the fact that skilled labor and labor costs are going to remain at the top of this list, I don't think is going to be disputed in any way. So when we get requests for information, when a company comes in either through a direct lead or in another way, shape, or form, essentially what will happen is we'll get a requirement. We will put together a value proposition and tell them what they've asked about our region and then also what they didn't ask about that they need to know. Often companies will come in and ask 1 or 2 questions, maybe ask about what does your labor and talent pool look like. What we will add on to that is, yes, here's what it looks like today. And now we want to introduce you to all of our higher education leaders that can then customize programs and get you and ensure that you have your labor pool of the future. So again, there's just one example. We will also then understand from them what their site requests are. What kind of physical space do they need? And understand that, and we'll share that with all of our community partners. And they will provide, and we'll work with them to identify the best sites and locations to then send back in a proposal to those clients. Hopefully they'll visit through site tours or doing some virtuals, but you know, site tours are still happening and continue to happen. We'll continue to follow up with additional information, but ultimately we'll send them a final proposal and then we'll continue working through them from their selection of a site to all the way through to the PR process where we announce their location and then help get them visibility in the community. In a traditional economic development world, this was actually our plan for this year, and surprisingly and very thrillingly, we probably accomplished about 80% of all of this that you see. Visiting different markets, going into Los Angeles and Orange County and creating 100 new contacts, working on foreign direct investment leads, visiting the Bay Area regularly. What we're going to see in the next year, as Barry will talk about, is doing this in a much more virtual manner, and also targeting our marketing in greater ways, where we are doing, for example, direct paid social media or paid articles and digital articles and links through, let's say, the Puget Sound Business Journal, or down in Los Angeles, spreading the word and encouraging people to come back and find out about the California option on our website if they're having challenges and wanting to get out of more populated urban areas. The other thing we're really proud of this year, and that's a huge piece of our operations and what we're accomplishing and getting done, is our broker MOUs and toolkit delivery. What this means is the commercial real estate brokerages in our region, we have to work hand in hand with them. We are all placing companies into locations. We are all helping close deals and attract them to our region. So we have 7 memorandums of understanding. So this is with 7 different brokerage offices in the region. And these are critical partnerships. They generate market interest, and having us all align our messaging and then partnering when we go into other markets and talk to potential clients and locates is an absolute critical piece. And we've seen tremendous traction. And we're continuing now to partner with different brokerage firms on joint marketing and research pieces as well. So this is going to continue to elevate our visibility. Business retention and expansion. Again, Barry will speak to this a little bit more, but this is a huge piece of economic development. I would say probably one of the most critical pieces that's not as sexy. It's not as sexy as a big announcement. Oh, wow, we brought a new company with 2,000 new jobs. But every day, if you keep a company here and keep them thriving and support them, as so many of our communities and investors have seen, this is going to be critical to our recovery, but is also critical to our survival and evolution as a region. We did conduct a survey last month on how folks were feeling about COVID and what was going on. And just to summarize this, and these slides are all as well going to be available after the program. When asked for write-in comments on what was needed the most common answer from businesses was, we just need to reopen. We want to do it safely, but we want to reopen safely as soon as possible. And then, of course, there were questions about funding and other support. So as we venture into this new world, we will be doing follow-up surveys in the near future as well to see what has shifted, and really digging into things like supply chain, reshoring on manufacturing, and other really key issues and focuses on digital transformations that Barry's going to talk about. If you're not familiar, we have a new tool online, though, that is also a service support for small businesses. And we launched this specifically to make sure we were also supporting our communities during this challenging time. And we thought, well, what can we do to help businesses or individuals that are at home? They've been laid off, or their company is shut down, or they need to repivot completely. This is an amazing tool online. If you go to greatersacramento.com/sizeup. Size Up is going to help anyone in any business really dissect and analyze using very, very big data sets that are extremely expensive on their own. They can go in and crunch this and compare themselves to competition and really rework or work over an entirely new business plan. This is the most visited page on our web, or the 4th most visited on our entire website since November. And in the last month has been the 3rd most visited page overall. So it's definitely getting a lot of use. With this, I'm getting close to the end of my presentation, but I see Scott Powell is just right on point. He's turned his video on. And Scott, if you want to just chat to the next 2 slides, what we're doing now with this is kind of transitioning into what Barry's going to tee up on his recovery presentation, and talking you through how do you deal with, how do you do economic development and build an economic recovery in these times. Scott, if you want to talk a little bit about these COVID-19 impacts then on GDP growth rates, labor markets, et cetera, that would be fantastic.
Great, thanks, Danielle. And if you're getting our weekly COVID newsletter, you've already seen some of these pieces of data. So I'm hoping for a lot of you this isn't new information, but we have been tracking some of the thought leaders in the projections from growth from Wells Fargo and JP Morgan on the bank side, Beacon Economics locally, the New York Federal Reserve, and you can see they all have some pretty drastic reductions in the the shrinkage of GDP. And one thing you need to keep in mind is if the economy contracts by 25%, which is what Wells Fargo is projecting, that means the economy has to grow 33% just to get back to even. So, as you'll see on the next slide, when we start talking about the different types of recoveries, a percentage decrease down is a much larger decrease up. And then the labor markets as well. So seeing the contraction of the local economy, you're also seeing the labor market starting to shrink. So last week, it was 2.4 million people have lost their jobs. It is trending in the right direction, but it's still at record highs, and we're still expecting to see that move forward. But speaking of the recovery, so everybody thinks the recovery is going to start in the third quarter. It's just a question of how fast and what the recovery will look like. So you'll see all the different, all the different examples of the recovery, from Z shape to L shape to a Nike swoosh to a hockey stick, to a constellation and other type of mythical creatures. Right now, it's still a little early to tell what it's going to look like, but it's, we'll wait to see. It's something we're tracked. So again, sign up for our newsletter. As we see that and learn it, we'll be sending it out to you guys on a weekly basis, so you know what we're seeing as well. But it's not all bad. So Walmart, Amazon have seen great, great growth. I mean, Walmart's up, as you can see on the slide, sales increased by 10%. Their e-commerce is up by almost by 75%. And then tech companies, again, have been, doing great. So there is still some great signs in there. But what this is telling us, and Barry will talk about, is that the digital economy is really going to matter. And digital transformation is how we're going to have to pivot the economy moving forward. Danielle?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. See, let me just get back so I can click here. There we go. All right. Well, this is where I do a Q&A period, but I'm getting ready to hand it over. I'm exactly on time, which never happens. I'm very proud of myself here. Getting ready to hand it over to our one and only President and CEO, Barry Broom, but really quickly so that Barry can get some feedback. Olivia, would you mind teeing up the question about how people are feeling? All right. So we have a little question here about how folks are feeling about the state of things in the Greater Sacramento region today. Please select all that apply. Although if you're feeling all of these, then there's a little bit of, we may have to check on the mental health issues as well, but hopefully you can kind of lean on one or the other. We do have a good comment in the chat that I will review in just a minute. It's a little bit of a long comment, so I will check that out very shortly, and we'll see if we can maybe answer that at the end. So if everybody's maybe filled out that poll by any chance, Olivia, feel free to share it. And then what I'm going to do. All right, so we have a good amount of cautiously optimistic people. So that looks like the winner at this point. So Barry, hopefully maybe that gives you a little bit of insight as to folks' perceptions right now, so that you've got a sense of the conversation today. With that, we can either get you unmuted and volume on, and hand it on over to you. Our President and CEO is going to, oh gosh, all right. Well, it looks like he's all prepared for COVID. So with that, I'm going to let you safely and socially distantly do all the things you need to do. Barry, I'm going to be your Vanna White. So just hit me with next slide whenever you're ready for the next, and it's all yours.
Clean shaven too, so the beard was temporary, but it was a bad day. It was staff day. Before I go into this, I did get a chat message online. We on the startup ecosystem. So we have probably about 100 venture. We make presentations to venture capital funds in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. So we have, I think, about 100 VCs in our network down there. And we're constantly updating them on, the achievements of the ecosystem. So on the startup scene here, I think one of the things that hurts our community is we don't have a startup scene like the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, and no one does. Believe it or not, our startup scene is in the top 15 in the US. The data that Danielle gave you is significant. It's growing at a significant rate. Our startup scene dwarfs Nashville, outperforms Salt Lake, Phoenix. It's really a lot closer to Seattle than people realize. So being next to Silicon Valley, where you have thousands and thousands of emerging companies and 489 venture funds, it doesn't sound very impressive to have 4 or 5, but Seattle tells me they only have 3 or 4 legitimate venture funds in their market. And I think their startup scene in Seattle is very soft. I don't think it's as strong as ours. So it's something we need to do a lot better. And a lot of the things that you'll hear me talk about. So when we talk, it is inherent that we're talking about every way in which a company gets formed and every way in which a business gets built. So, we got billed as this big business attraction group. That is not really what we ever were, but, you kind of get labeled when you do something new. We're really an organization that builds a marketplace, focuses on investment and jobs, and then focuses on increased competitiveness and moving people to a more sophisticated economy around tradable sectors. So, the challenge on the VC side has been, finding fund managers. So really the challenge has been who can manage and run these funds? How do we get them here? The Bay Area Silicon Valley funds, they want to take our money but not manage and run it in this market. And then, we were working with Kevin Nagel on launching Jaguar Ventures, but obviously this is going to be a big capital disruption. So, we're going to have to revisit what's that best strategy going forward. But we're in constant contact with the VC community in the Bay Area. We're going to be constantly integrated with the startup accelerators in the Bay Area, and you'll continue to see an integration of that philosophy in what we're doing. So go ahead now. I'll move through this pretty quickly, Danielle. So obviously, what does it mean to be a champion? And I think part of what we're looking for in champions is who's actually going to bolster and build our economy. You saw this slide. We started way in the hole. The 2008 recovery was difficult. What's not on this slide is we moved from 40 to 33% independency on government. We moved from the second highest young adult unemployment to 10th. We moved our inclusion numbers, which is equity and wealth, across all constituencies, specifically the shortcomings in Latinx and African American communities. That number 91, we moved into the top 10 among mid-tiered markets. So one of the things we've learned when we organize the strategy, we execute against it, we can move the needle when we do get changed outcomes. And we're just going to have to let some of the dust settle on COVID-19 to find out, what are all of our opportunities going forward. Next slide, yeah. Since this is primarily a Sacramento County constituency, one of the things we do, basically all the communities in our first 5 years contributed $4.5 million to the organization. It's a per population base. As Danielle showed, there's a $250,000 digital service model. They cannot run or operate or duplicate on their own. Marketing communications, business development services, integrated working relationships, and a financial return. So in the case of Sacramento County, due to the great work that Phil's done on the airport development, Metro Air Park. Metro Air Park, we just had another big player grab land on Metro Air Park in the peak of COVID-19. It's a big income generator for the county. The county deserves a lot of credit for restructuring the fees, but we pay attention to how the governments get returns, because that's the responsibility of the CEOs, is to fund the organization, help the local governments. They get services and returns. That's the value proposition back. Next slide. Obviously, we have some tailored specific support, like things like in the case of Sacramento, the work we're doing on Aggie Square, the Mobility Center has some more direct, unique benefits to Sacramento. But as you'll find out, these are tradable sectors, industry models. Those are a great example of us building new industry models. They're tradable sectors. They create higher than normal jobs. And so these are just examples of some of the things we do specifically in each one of our cities. The economic development team has some very specific activities that we're working on. Obviously in Elk Grove, we're working with California North State. Rancho, we've got a retrofit of a technology play, trying to absorb those real estate assets. We've got a direct strategy around the redevelopment of Aerojet, Mather Field, the Bridge District for West Sacramento, Technology Park and Woodland and Davis. So each community may have a localized activity that we're providing custom support for. They all blend into our overall regional partnership, and they all drive the economy equally, and everybody shares on those benefits equally, which is why you drive a regional model. Next slide. So obviously we talked a little bit about data services. I mean, essentially everything that Danielle was talking about is when employers look at us, they really are looking at our analytics platforms. And one of the challenges we have, you know, the way we're set up as an MSA, our natural government data analytics mislead people on what's going on. So if we get a venture capital investment out of New York and Washington, D.C., if someone looks at our venture activity online, digitally, or through data, it looks like zero. You know, Intel's entire research is in Folsom, but it gets scored where their headquarters at. Now, UC Davis is doing $900 million of research. It gets attributed to the data in Oakland because that's where the University of California office of the presidency is. So managing these data in these evidential platforms is really how we interact. So we interact with an Amazon or a Google. That's usually a pass through to a Deloitte, an E&Y, and Accenture. Google will shift work to Accenture. Accenture will interface with our organization online. They will pull up all of our data and evidence, and they will start mining it. We know right now, for instance, 2 of the biggest companies in the world, their chief innovation officers are inside our website going through all this data. So we'll hit them on Twitter. Maybe we hit them up on LinkedIn. They stay dark, but we can track their behaviors. So we know what major investors are actually going through our website because they're mining our website for this data. And that's how we know who's talking to us. And it's also how we give them the evidence that we're not the old government town of 1999. You know, we're not a tired community. We're not a retirement community. The people from the Bay Area that move here, they're not retiring. They're 31 years old and they're college educated. And if you have that conversation with a venture capitalist in Palo Alto, he or she will argue with you. So what we do, we already know what their biases are against the market. We build the evidential platform like how profitable businesses are in California. Yes, we have high taxes and we have really difficult regulations, and we would like to see those regulations managed and reduced in a more meaningful way, especially on labor laws. But businesses in California make way more money than businesses in Texas. That's if you're a grocery store, a restaurant, or a tech company. That is something people will disbelieve, so you have to present it in a deep evidential-based platform with third-party evidence, and it has to be peer-reviewed. This is our job impact in our first 5 years. And as you can see, all our local governments together got $76 million. And to be a supporter of the state, which is where our schools get, they got $129 million. So if you think about a public investment of under $5 million, all the services, the data, the evidence, the expertise, the common working partnerships, there's a huge financial return on our governance. And that's why we want to see GoBiz get built out. And that's why we champion a stronger state agency. It looks to some people like it's a zero-sum game, but there are big returns to states when they do economic development right. Next slide. Obviously, your economy is a formula. So when you think of your economy, it's like a stew, right? So if you sat down with a great stew and there was no beef in it, you would be like, well, this isn't that great of a stew. It doesn't have beef. Or if you sat down and it didn't have potatoes, like I'm Irish. I like potatoes in my stew. So your economy is a formula of activities and behaviors. And one of the most important things that indicate economic success, what are the college graduates doing in your community? Are they staying or are they leaving, right? So if you remember Robert Nelson's work on fixing the graduation rate at Sac State, he took that from 8.5% over 4 years. It's now running around 35%. The freshman class is looking like it could graduate at 70% in 4 years, and we keep almost 2/3 of those kids. That's the economic leverage for your economy to get better. So when the UC Davis kids graduate and go to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, LA, or leave the state, that brings real economic harm to our region. And ignoring that and considering that, well, they grew up in San Francisco, or like a lot of people would say, well, that's where the tech jobs are. Those things are all true, but those are deep undermining behaviors in our community. We can't change our economy until we reverse those behaviors. So when you look at Aggie Square and the California Mobility Center, you know, not only are they tradable sectors, but they're also industries of the future, but they're connected to our 2 major university institutions. If they integrate their curriculums and their internship programs around them, and we start bringing those economic models up, the students that are at Aggie Square, the students that are working at the California Mobility Center, hey, they may join Tesla if we get Tesla to bring an engineering base into Sacramento, or they may join a life science company. So the integration of these academic institutions in our economy give us all our power, allow us to pivot, allow us to recapture our kids, and it starts reverse engineering the demographic shortcomings in our economy that have been created by having a slow graduation rate over 4 years at Sac State and ignoring the fact that the UC Davis graduates leaving the area have a harmful effect to the economy. So we go back, worst, best, there's all kinds of ways to look at data. But we know, for instance, with the graduation rate improving at Sac State, so the difference between a kid graduating in 4 years versus 6 years is about $80,000 in income to the Sac State student. So the opportunity cost of being at Sac State 6 years is higher debt and 2 years of opportunity cost income as a recent college graduate. So if the UC Davis graduates don't stay here, our educational achievement numbers stay flat and decline, and it poorly positions us analytically for better companies in tradable sectors. So as we capture those students, our analytics go up, our appeal goes up to technology, and then our overall tradable sector position improves. So as you can see, tracking the retention rate of students is really a critical part of successful communities, and we've improved dramatically. So why else do you work regionally? If you live in Sacramento, chances are, 40% of the people in Sacramento County go to Roseville, Folsom, Davis, and Woodland for a job. Counties have a higher rate. Most cities are only producing about 25% of their jobs. So if Roseville produces about 20% of their jobs, 80% of Roseville residents have to go somewhere else to work. All that income goes back to Roseville. All the Folsom residents, if they work at Davis in a startup or they work downtown as a partner in a law firm, that income goes back to Folsom. So now if you're looking at why these communities work together, they're sharing a workforce, they're sharing an industry, they're sharing income, and as they work together, they become more efficient and productive. That allows the market to scale. You're capturing your college kids. You're building new industry models like Aggie Square and the California Mobility Center. And pretty soon, what will happen within 2 or 3 years is we're going to be known as the center of excellence on cell therapies, and we're going to be known as the center of excellence on hardware techniques in the next modern clean tech mobility. And then that's going to build us a market reputation. That market reputation will be backed up by the validation of data. You'll see the shift away from government to tradable sectors. Income will go up. Economic resiliency will go up. Inclusion will improve. And there'll be greater tax advantages for all of our governments. So that's the formula that we're working on. Talked a little bit about these industries. Obviously, PEM Motion out of Germany has designed and built most of the contemporary hardware technology for BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen, Ford. They are the anchor of the California Mobility Center. PEM is a for-profit company that spun out of Aachen University. So PEM's like the Stanford Research Institute or SRI. They're a for-profit company, but they're basically all connected to Aachen University in Germany. And they all have this extensive track record in building these clean mobile technology devices. And they're our thought leader and anchor on the California Mobility Center, also with the great leadership of SMUD, Sacramento State Los Rios. Obviously, we're one of the top 2 or 3 markets in the world in agricultural technology. And then our life science industry position gets increasingly more dynamic. And it's really going to be, I think, the backbone of the future economy in the region. Not healthcare, life sciences, much different. Healthcare exists in this market because of the size of our population, our ability to service Stockton, our ability to service Redding, our ability to service Chico, our ability to service Reno. So it's a big healthcare employer, 20% of our economy, 157,000 jobs. It's not a tradable sector. It's totally tied to population trend, just like government. Tradable sectors can scale and they differentiate the economy. And that's why there's a slight distinction between the life science sector and the healthcare sector. So obviously, I think our technology sector has been improving. It's going to accelerate. I think you're going to see industries that were more commodity based shift greater and greater into technology. So our ability to deliver hard skills and technology to skills to our community is going to be an important part of our economic position. Some industries like real estate, banking, weren't as technologically advanced. Now they're rapidly becoming more technologically advanced. So if you work at a bank, you might need a Salesforce credential to do that now. And you might be running a customer relationship management system and managing the outward-facing relationship of that bank into a digitalized economy, online through the internet and other social media platforms. So this is a great example of how Aggie Square will drive the entire region. So Aggie Square is going to be a nerve center. It's where regenerative medicine is going to be built. So I'll give you, I graduated with a 2.36 GPA in college. So when I start talking about regenerative medicine, it's the old, I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but actually do have an extensive background in biotech. I built 31 biotech companies and 4 venture funds in Michigan. So cell therapies is basically what you're seeing now when someone takes the blood of someone that has an antibody and they give it to a sick patient of COVID-19 and that patient gets better from the blood of somebody who built the antibody. That's cell therapy. That's taking a natural part of your body and getting it repurposed and repositioned back, oftentimes complemented with other drugs so that you're cured. The old industry model, pharmaceuticals and biotech, is a chemistry, a small molecule chemistry, where every one of us takes the same drug if we need Celebrex. Many of us are taking the same antidepressant. Many of us are taking the same blood pressure medicine. Well, we're all completely different human beings. And so, that was the shotgun approach that has major toxicity. Cell therapies and regenerative medicine is basically curing us, not managing our disease, having the medicine be more precise and precision, thus the gene editing part of Aggie Square. And now all of a sudden, we will have a Phil Cerna drug. We will have a Barry Broom drug. We will have a Daniel Casey drug. You'll have a combination of cell therapies and a possible partnership with a drug candidate that will actually lead to a cure. It's going to revolutionize the economy, and we're going to be an early adopter to it, and that's going to allow us to be an industry leader. And if you look regionally, Lincoln's got 5 companies, Loomis. Almost everybody has 3, 4, 5 companies. So when you see a movement like this, you kind of know you're on the right path now, with a major strategy, because you can already see the sprinkling of the success is occurring regionally. Next slide. So I'll just pause so you know to change. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about Aggie Square. A lot of people are telling me they don't understand Aggie Square, and I appreciate that. So there's 3 things about Aggie Square, okay? It is an applied research play around UC Davis. So applied versus basic. Basic is you have a novel discovery. It's an idea. We know the university historically hasn't had a lot of success in transferring that out of the university into an employer or into a company, thus costing us jobs and investment. Aggie Square is going to be the application of that science expertise. We think it'll create 10,000 direct jobs in the Sacramento area and another 27,000 indirect jobs. So let's just say there's a company called Pfizer. They make traditional drug candidates. They're a very large company. They have a hard time with novel discoveries, but they're heavily capitalized and they know how to drive products through the FDA and into manufacturing. They would put 25 researchers at Aggie Square to work on developing new technologies, and they may actually want to acquire companies spinning out of UC Davis. Then hopefully what would happen is long-term, they might build a lab in the region somewhere, put 500 researchers on the ground, source their technology out of Aggie Square, draw talent from around the world, capture UC Davis graduates, and get a deeper foothold. This will also include spin-outs and smaller companies. Wexford is a heavily capitalized East Coast product. They're a developer that specializes in novel communities. It's an incredible achievement by UC Davis that they were able to draw Wexford. It's one of the best companies in the world at developing knowledge communities. So when you see Aggie Square, there'll be a training interface with the neighborhoods. Aggie Square will raise services to the neighborhoods. Aggie Square will raise incomes in the neighborhoods. It'll raise incomes inside, smaller service models like barbershops, pizza parlors. And then, of course, it'll drive tax income to the city, the county, and the school system. And it'll give us a brand and a reputation while capturing our kids, raising our profile, and going through what we mentioned before. Next slide. Same thing with mobility. It's located across the street from Sac State. So both these novel new industry models that are around invention and discovery that will create large-scale corporate partnerships with our universities, will help us capture our college graduates, will create leverage into the neighborhoods, in other words, more jobs for the neighborhoods, increased services with the neighborhoods, are also regional assets, because as you can see region-wide, El Dorado County has some incredibly exciting companies. Terzo Power, headquartered in El Dorado Hills, is on the board of the California Mobility Center. So political jurisdictions are only acknowledged by local governments and people that work in political jurisdictions. Industry doesn't acknowledge that, and you can see the economy is seamless. And so even though the Mobility Center is in urban Sacramento across the street from Sac State, maybe a company in the city of Roseville does an IPO because it got hardware ramping services there. Maybe a company in Elk Grove licenses technology out of Aggie Square. I think the California North State University projects in Elk Grove can create a different asset around the life sciences in Aggie Square because it's a proprietary university without the academic difficulties of a UC school. So as of right now, we've got a $100 million venture fund, $15 million in partnership. Obviously, this is stalled a little bit just because of COVID, but we do have two major companies nationally that are looking right now at putting $15 million into the partnership. It's chaired by Arlen Orchard. SMUD has done a great job at putting this on our back, and I think you're going to continue to see it be really exciting. Obviously, Los Rios had a $50 million pledge. We were not able to pass our bond. We're encouraging Los Rios to reboot their bond in November, as we are encouraging Measure A to go back on the ballot in November. This is, recovering this economy is a combination of getting out of the way of the economy, but also doubling down on investments in it. And we're very bullish on the potential of the Mobility Center and Aggie Square. So in addition to life sciences, we're looking at fintech. And this is a great example. We brought up 6 or 7 small fintech firms. One of them started to scale Zenify. They're in Natomas. We have a dialogue going on with the global head of fintech at Salesforce. So we're heavily connected now in the Salesforce. And we started looking at Zenify. Then we started looking at a company called DialSource that's in El Dorado Hills. That's actually a potential IPO. We found some fantastic companies like Riskalyze, which is in Folsom. There's some great companies in Roseville. And we started looking at these fintech companies, and without us really focusing on them, 52 companies have about 8,824 jobs. To have a really robust cluster, you're looking at about 25,000 jobs. So when you look at the life science sector and the fintech sector, we think in 5 years, both those clusters will tip over 25,000. So right now, food and ag is our only real cluster at 35,000 jobs. So now with the life science and fintech sector, which might be more digital, pick up things like real estate tech and health tech, you're going to see 2 new industry clusters emerge here. And those are the kind of jobs that throw off into the economy and elevate incomes and help us more stable. We started developing this about 15 months. Obviously, we're going to accelerate it now. Eric Schmidt from Google, I saw him on Wall Street, and he basically said COVID has accelerated technology by 10 years. So we're working with the Aspen Institute. The director of Upskill lives in Sacramento, believe it or not. Works for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's been helping us. The global head of fintech from Salesforce has been guiding this. General Assembly is a training group out of the Bay Area. We're working with them on locating here. starting with a cohort of about 100 people. Sorry, it's my Ohio accent. And really, what General Assembly's done is they've been in the communities like Louisville, they've gone in and found traditional at-risk youth, young adult, and dislocated workers, has given them hard-skilled certifications and has employed them in the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 range. I've seen the same thing in Seattle. So here in our community, with this incredible loss of jobs to so many people, but candidly, most of those were low-skilled jobs that you and I wouldn't want. And now we have a chance to pivot our training around harder skills and elevate people more quickly to better jobs. And of course, that'll improve our technology relationships. But certifications, a Salesforce certification is the fastest way now in America to take someone out of poverty, according to the Aspen Institute. So these certifications cost $5,000 to $7,000. Workforce dollars out of SETA could be used. We're talking with Mayor Steinberg. We're going to do a coordinated project with the Urban League on upskilling some folks in our neighborhoods. But this is going to be a big movement in our organization to shift to a workforce strategy around digitalization and upskills. Okay, next slide kind of did that. So obviously, we got to find the people, apply them, reskill them, place them. But as I said, General Assembly has taken 1,200 at-risk young adults, retrained them in 90 days to software engineering skill levels, and have placed them with employers like Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce, and that's our goal to do the same thing. Yeah, so if you look at, thank you for catching that number. If you look at what happened in 2008, we were one of the last economies to recover. We were heavily dependent upon housing. We had a huge fracture in the housing market. And what Brookings basically said was, you have no digital skill sets, you have very little digital training, and yet the market's rapidly moving in that direction. That's the story of the Brookings Institute. We were leaving people behind. It was a skills gap. And then we worked on simple industries instead of advanced industries or tradable sectors like we talked about at Aggie Square and the Mobility Center. So now you're starting to see how critical it's going to be to pivot, because now what turned into a longer term prospect is really going to be something we're going to have to be proficient in the next 3 to 6 months. So this is recent Aspen Institute data. We like to use third-party data because it just validates us. I mean, what we say matters, but it kind of doesn't. What other people say that are more established does. But this is data from the upskilling effort by the Aspen Institute. 8 out of 10 middle skill jobs are going to need digital skill sets. So if you're going to work in a restaurant, you're going to have to know what to do with Uber Eats and DoorDash. And I think you're going to see in the food and agricultural fields, I think you're going to see a lot more automation. So you may be working as a farmhand, but you may have to be able to manage an irrigation system from your iPhone. So these digital skills are just going to dramatically accelerate. So this is really important. So if there's one thing I would love everybody to walk out of here with a real understanding on is, how do you create sustainable economies and how do you create wealth for everybody in your community? And if you look at, there's a guy, Enrico Moretti, the book is called The New Geography of Jobs. And it's a really important book. It's not a heavy read. We've given it to edits. We've given it to our team. It's really important to remember, because what happens in our community is we try to work on everything at once. And when we're trying to work on everything at once, we end up diluting our efforts. Every initiative's undercapitalized, and then we have a hard time getting the leverage to scale the work. If you just work on transforming your economy around tradable sectors, it starts solving all your other problems. And so this book that Enrico Moretti put out, fairly common knowledge for veteran economic developers, but for average citizens who don't do this, this is a really important book. So to explain it simply, one job at Aggie Square is going to create 5 jobs in the neighborhood. One job at the California Mobility Center is going to create 5 jobs in the neighborhood. It takes 5 jobs in the government to create 1 job in the neighborhood. Because if you work at the DMV, or if you work at workers' comp, or if you're working, as a policy advisor, you don't bring a supply chain with you. There's no need for a logistics platform. There's no production facility connected to you. You don't have a bunch of contractors coming into your community providing you software as a service. But, if you're Elon Musk at Tesla and you put 2,000 engineers in our region, pretty soon, the suppliers for Tesla start populating around those engineers because they have an exchange of goods and services around product development. So if we narrow our behavior around tradable sectors, we move away from government, which is important because now we know, right, the furloughs are coming. We're going to have a pension crisis in the next 2 years. So as our private economy recovers, we're going to start bearing out the burden of government cuts. And that's going to affect our economy. It's going to affect our services. So if we move to tradable sectors, that puts more income into our government for basic services. You saw the returns we gave Sacramento County, right? And then all of a sudden, those jobs distribute in the neighborhoods. It raises incomes. And so instead of trying to do every single thing in an economic change, we're going to rebuild restaurants, we're going to do little startups, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. If you build the competitiveness agenda around tradable sectors, you can operate with one strategy, one movement market-wide, and you can start really correcting a lot of problems. Then you get down to a manageable set of problems. So the problem we had in the previous economy that Brookings gave us a data on, it was 1/3 of the people in our region were already struggling financially in 2018. So because they were in low-wage jobs, because they were in jobs that weren't tradable, because they didn't have skills to compete for higher wage jobs. So if you move your industry model up to tradable sectors and you bring people with you in a training model, like upskilling their digital skills, suddenly the restaurants just start opening up. They got higher paid clienteles. They pay more for product and food, and then the wages go up, and then the income goes up into the government. So there's more services for education, police, and fire. So that's the model. It's a narrowly set of focuses around tradable sectors. And in the case of Aggie Square and the Mobility Center and FinTech, jobs of the future and industries of the future. And they scale. So that is this value explanation. If there's one thing that I would love you to walk away to understand, this is what it would be it. So we're going to be doing more retention and expansion, right? So we're working with the banks and some of our local communities. So this digital skill set, we have 105 people on this call right now. Hey, I could have all 148 life science companies in the region on a single call, have them come through a data portal where they tell me I need money. I got a problem building something. I'm struggling with a permit. And then we can take them through our competitiveness improvements, link them to better services and product, and then we're done. We've got a portfolio of data and evidence on how these companies are behaving and what they can do. And so and that's exactly how we'll hit Silicon Valley. We already know we've already identified all the cell therapy companies in Silicon Valley. I think there's about 137. So now we can go into Silicon Valley instead of me going down on the train and banging my head on doors. We can now go into Silicon Valley digitally and just elevate them. So student entrepreneurship, digital upscaling, and now the arts community. One of the other feedbacks we've got from Salesforce is they love digitally trained people with arts backgrounds. So as you know, our arts community's been really hit hard. The creative economy's been really hit hard. And a lot of those artists, they do things on the side to make money so they continue to be an artist. My dad actually spent the last 25 years of his life making his living as an artist, believe it or not. And, now we're going to look at the arts community as a place where we can increase our digital skill set, increase our competition for jobs, but also help sustain this creative economy that we all love and that's important to us. So I got some questions. and I will go through the chat room, and if there's any more, I will do that. So on the ecosystem, the question was, we didn't seem to be focusing on it, but it's seamless. We are. I would like to build, one of the things, we're like anybody else, we've lost some capacity. Our investors have held up, but, we're paranoid like anybody else. But, upon, we get into single digit unemployment, you're going to start to see our organization possibly run an angel network and also build a virtual accelerator model that's kind of being developed by the Carlson Center at Sac State. So maybe it's us working with Venture Calis in the Carlson Center, but you're going to see us do more on that, and student entrepreneurship will be a focal point on that. On the mandated minimum wage, well, and this is why, when the minimum wage order came down and everybody was up in arms about it that owned the business, I wasn't that up in arms about it because, I'm a living wage guy, not a minimum wage guy. So I want people making $30, $40 an hour with healthcare benefits, not $15 an hour. But the minimum wage jobs, when the data comes out, is going to be crushed. And this is the challenge on something like a minimum wage, right? You go to $15 an hour, you start affecting the business model negatively, they start digitalizing out. You go to the McDonald's on Broadway. It's not like I go there all the time. But, I watched McDonald's, and if you were ever in Seattle, go spend time in Seattle and go into their restaurants. They hardly have any employees. They have totally digitalized the receptionist. The manager's also running the bar. I mean, they probably have a half to 1/3 of the people in those restaurants. So I always worry about a mandated wage level because businesses will operate out from under it if it doesn't work for them. I love highly skilled and skill gap objectives because these digital skills will get people to big paying jobs, and that's the goal. The graduation rate of Sac State, or the ability to graduate in 4 years. I think Sac State's done a great job. Both Gary May and Robert Nelson are on our board. And I really do feel that we're going to be able to maintain our student activity and momentum. And I think one of the things on reduced class sizes, one of the things that I hope will happen, and I got appointed by President Napolitano to a 20-person task force for UCs on what to do about their budget cuts, how to mitigate them, how to re-emphasize the importance of higher ed. One of the things that I think is very important is that we never go back to the way we were doing things before, especially at higher ed. I can't speak to K-12 because I don't have any familiarization with that. But, I worked very closely with Arizona State. They moved their students online in 4 days. They've always had a big digital online. And how many people here have, gotten pinged by University of Illinois? They're offering an MBA. It's a great MBA school. They're offering an online MBA program for $22,000. University of Arizona is one of the top 5 entrepreneur schools in the country. Their new MBA program is $30,000. So what you're going to see is you're going to see dramatically reduced rates on these graduate degrees. People are going to go online because they're becoming more comfortable with it. And I think Sac State and UC Davis and the Cal State and the UC system has to move to an online platform to increase their reach, but also to create incredible revenue. Imagine if you could live in Sacramento and get an online degree from Haas, the MBA program at Cal, 25 grand. What if you could get an MBA from UCLA for 25 grand? There'd be 500,000 people around the world signing up to get that online MBA at UCLA or Haas. Or what if you could get an agricultural degree online at UC Davis? Most of Israel gets their a big food and ag player. They all have UC Davis credentials. So I think the graduation rate will hold, and I think there will be much better opportunities. So I hear direct jobs and what classifications. Here's what I think is happening, and we've been watching this a while. What's a digital tech job? Is it fintech? So now you're helping a company with Safe Credit or Golden One or 5-Star. How do you communicate online through a mobile device to your clients? Now you're going to move over to telehealth. you're going to see our hospitals. I mean, you're going to see a doctor on Zoom from now on, unless you're really, really, really sick. So here's hoping we're all online with our doctors. Now, all of a sudden, instead of you waiting 5 days or 8 days or 12 days to see a doctor, you're going to get a Zoom meeting, and it's going to come a lot quicker. So what is going to happen between these industry classifications is they're going to start to blur, and they're not going to be as distinct. Because in healthcare digitalization, real estate digitalization, banking digitalization, retail digitalization, it's going to start to blur from a job classification standpoint, because it's really going to be about a Salesforce accreditation or a Google accreditation or a Microsoft accreditation. What about job creation for 50 plus age group who needs benefits, gainful employment, work loan, or as somebody who probably needs to do that, hopefully not into the 70s. I mean, I have to tell you, when people were talking about 5G, I had no idea what they were talking about. That was like 3 months ago, 4 months ago. I mean, I kind of knew what they were talking about, but I really didn't know what they were talking about. Apps, digital transformation. So what I did in my basement the last 2.5 months is I went online on YouTube and I went through all the MIT Sloan programs for digitalization. I'm actually now looking at getting a formal certification, and I'm actually going to learn Python and other coding techniques. Now, I will guarantee you, I will never be able to make my living doing this, but at least as a guy who's 59 years old, when someone's talking to me about Python, I'm not going to think of a snake. When someone's talking to me about digitalization, I really didn't know what they were talking about. The digital divide, the digital desert. I really didn't know what they were talking about. And I figured it was so far out, I wasn't paying that much of attention to it. Well, you know, I paid a lot of attention to it. You saw where the city took some of their federal funds and gave free internet to everyone. Well, that's the precursor to this General Assembly program. So I've been talking to the mayor going, hey, the internet is now life or death. It's not how you get HBO. It's how you're going to get your food. It might be where you get your employment. So we've got to put a mobile device in everybody's home. You know, just like we had to put a computer in before, we've got to get internet to everybody. We've got to somehow accelerate 5G, and all us folks 59, 50, you know, we're going to have to learn how to do this work and even take our own expertise and learn how to apply it to a digital platform. Or, you know, we're going to get replaced by some really smart kid. And even though I'm trying to keep them, I still need my job. And then I have one more question. Okay, I think that's it. So let me just recap. We're a market builder. We provide comprehensive economic development services to our 20 communities that are on our board. The presidents and CEOs of the region fund us to provide these services to relieve economic pressure off of Phil Cerna, Patrick Kennedy, Darrell Steinberg, Christopher Cabolden, Tom Stollard, and then through that scaling money, we allow all of our communities to get really important services like $250,000 in digital data platforms that no one of them could afford to do themselves. So if you were working for the city of Sacramento and you went into the city manager's office and said, I need $250,000 for a digital platform, he'd be like, what, are you kidding me? That's a police officer. So now they get that for a reduced rate. It's a shared economy model. And then we all operate around one single region. And then the investment community accesses the entire region through one platform through our organization. We're moving towards advanced economies and transformation to relieve our dependency on government because we need the tax base and we want those jobs to go into our neighborhoods. And then we're moving towards markets of the future like fintech, life sciences, and mobility because we want to catch the coming waves of new economic opportunities as a leader and not chase them once we see them mature in Silicon Valley and watch them migrate out to Austin, Seattle, and Denver for preferred tax benefits and incentive packages. So with that, I will thank everybody and turn it back over to
Barry. This is why I love these Zoom webinars. You are literally exactly on time. This is fantastic. It's never happened before. It's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I have the distinct pleasure now of getting ready to introduce our next speaker. And while we do that, Olivia is going to put a little poll up because we'd like to know, what are you most looking forward to, or where are you most looking forward to traveling when restrictions are fully lifted. So we just would love to see where people are at on that. And with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Mark Heineke. He is the Air Service Development and Marketing Manager for Sacramento International Airport. He has over 25 years of commercial air service department experience with previous management positions at American Airlines, Lufthansa, Swiss Air, Swiss International Airlines, Sabre Technology Solutions, InterVistas Consulting, and Vantage Airport Group. So he's got it all. He's responsible for promoting commercial air service development at Sacramento International Airport, engaging stakeholders and local and regional business, tourism, government, economic development entities. Here you go. That's why we're here today. And also promoting the airport as the premier gateway to Northern California. He serves on the board of Cal Travel Association, and he is also a representative and serves on GSEC's Competitiveness Council that I spoke of earlier today. He's a Northern California native, holds an MBA from Thunderbird and a BA in economics. And he speaks French, German, and Spanish. I did not know this about you, and now I know this. So we'll have to tap into that if we ever, as we have foreign dignitaries visit. In his spare time, he's an avid travel enthusiast, go figure, and has visited 115 plus and counting companies on 7 continents around the globe. So Mark, with that, I will be your Vanna White today, and I'll take you through slides. And as we wrap up your presentation, hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A as well. It's all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danielle. And thanks for the opportunity to share with the group today. As you can imagine, the COVID-19 crisis has really upended our industry. And it's really, my job description very quickly overnight changed from air service development to air service retention. And so as we go through this, work our way through this, this crisis, I wanted to share with you where we've come from, where we are right now, and how things are looking into the future. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so 2019 was a banner year for Sacramento. We handled over 13 million passengers. That was up from 12 million passengers the year prior. And we've just been on a skyrocket kind of growth path the last 5-6 years. And so leading into the crisis, we were on a really great projectile, and that's where we stood. So in early March of this year, go ahead and do next slide. As of early March, we were anticipating that we'd have 175 plus daily flights to over 40 nonstop destinations by this July. Aeromexico was planning to do double daily flights to Guadalajara. Air Canada was going to add a second daily nonstop flight to Vancouver for the peak summer season. JetBlue was planning a second daily daytime nonstop flight to New York, JFK, and planned to extend their seasonal nonstop service to Boston into the fall. Southwest Airlines was planning 100 flights per day. We would have been about the 16th largest station in their network to 23 destinations. And Volaris was planning double daily flights to a combination of some important VFR, visit friends and relatives markets in Mexico, including Guadalajara, León, and Morelia. Then reality hits. So COVID-19 really hit about mid-March, and you can see from the graph here that traffic demand just kind of fell off the cliff. What this is showing is the TSA throughput counts. So these are the passengers that pass through the TSA security checkpoints. So it's really kind of an outbound number. But you can see that we dropped kind of just within a short span of a couple of weeks from 80 to 90% of last year's figures down to maybe 5%. And that's where we bottomed out, was about 5% of last year's demand around April 20th. And then during May, we've seen a bit more of a positive story. So we're starting to come out of the doldrums there. So next slide. One of the things to keep in mind, and I don't think a lot of people really fully appreciate this, is that over 50% of the US passenger fleet is grounded right now. So meaning that all the airlines that fly in the US, you know, if they had 1,000 airplanes combined, over 500 would be on the ground right now. And that's where we're really dealing with. And we got to the point in late March and early April where airlines were they couldn't cancel flights soon enough to keep up with the decreased demand. And so now They've been retiring older aircraft and refleeting, trying to make the most sense of this, of how to look forward to the future. Next slide. The other thing is that airline capacity continues to outstrip passenger demand. And so this is taking a look for a recent week in May, where you can see that only 8.5% of US airline flights are 70% full or larger. Now, Delta has been artificially capping its flights at 60% of capacity to comply with the recommended social distancing guidelines. But right now, airlines are losing, millions of dollars per day and billions overall for the industry around the world. So things are still not profitable, but at least they're on the way back to recovery. Next slide. One of the encouraging things that we've seen here is I keep track of the daily TSA counts here at the airport, and we're seeing that our numbers are outpacing the US national average by 3.5 percentage points, which is really appreciable because we're seeing that we're having stronger and faster growth and recovery here in our market than the average airport or market across the US. And so that's really encouraging as I continue to reach out to the airlines and encourage them to bring back service and reinstate service, that we're actually shining light, so to speak, within the industry. Next slide. A couple of the things to keep in mind as we look going forward. Sacramento economic fundamentals have changed greatly since the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. And right now, we are actually in the upper quartile of the 2020 Metro GDP growth estimate. This is provided by Oxford Economics. And you can see that Sacramento is like the 6th or 7th city from the left over there. But there are other cities that are going to have a harder struggle. A lot of those are tied to tourism and that sort of thing in terms of the recovery, and also manufacturing on the way back to recovery. Next slide. Tech centers and professional service hubs will continue to lead the growth. Fortunately, Sacramento is in the upper right-hand quadrant there that you can see, along with a number of other West Coast digitally oriented tech centers, San Jose, Seattle, San Francisco, also Austin. So we're in the right quadrant there to grow. We're at a slower growth rate, but it is all positive. And I think that's really going to help us weather this crisis and return to more positive days sooner than some of the other airports. Next slide. One thing to keep in mind is as we look to restore nonstop capacity, some of these markets that are heavily leisure oriented, like Las Vegas, Orlando, New Orleans, Nashville, they're probably going to have a harder time coming back to re-achieving their levels of 2019. Maybe our market, in terms of the outbound market, might be strong to some of these points, but the reverse market coming into our market from these points is going to be fairly weak. So that's something to keep in mind as we rebuild, that we need to be cognizant of as we go forward in terms of the best opportunities for service reinstatement. Next slide. However, there are uncertainties that remain. Leading economists differ in terms of their recovery projections, as was shown earlier by either Barry or Danielle. What is the recovery going to be? Is it going to be V-shaped, U-shaped, W-shaped, L-shaped? We really don't know. We don't have enough touch points yet in terms of the history of this recovery to really estimate what the true recovery is going to look like. The biggest question is, will there be a double dip in the fall of 2020? And how will that impact the overall structure of the recovery path going forward? And also, there's a wide variety of speculation in terms of, will there be a 24, 36, 48, or 60-month recovery path back to achieve 2019 levels? I personally am somewhat more of the optimistic bent in this regard. And based on our initial, at least for our market, based on our initial recovery touch points, I believe that it will be a relatively shorter recovery, but whether that's 24 or 36 months, I don't know for sure yet. Next slide. One thing that I wanted to point out is past precedent has suggested that there are opportunities for new market growth and recovery kind of contradictory to what I said about Orlando and Vegas, VFR, visit friends and relatives, and also leisure markets tend to recover faster than some business markets following an economic downturn. So for us, what that would mean is there's probably more likely an opportunity for increased service to sun and beach destinations, which I was glad to see is the #1 pick from you guys on the poll. What would that mean? More Hawaii, reinstatement of nonstop service to Kona, new nonstop service to Lihue on the island of Kauai. More Mexico, more nonstop flights to Cabo, to Cancun, to Puerto Vallarta. More sun destinations, Palm Springs, Florida, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale. Not all of these things are going to happen overnight, but I'd say that the likelihood or the opportunity of them happening over the next 12 to 18 months is much greater now than it was even pre-COVID. So the historical precedent there are a couple of examples. Hawaiian Airlines launched service to Sacramento post 9/11 in June of 2002, which at 9/11 you wouldn't have thought that would have happened. And then in April of 2010, Alaska Airlines launched nonstop service to Maui after the financial crisis. So there are springs of hope that come out of these financial difficulties. Next slide. Some encouraging scheduling developments here at Sacramento. So Volaris Airlines from Mexico will be resuming nonstop service to Guadalajara following a 2-month suspension. Initially, they plan to come back with 3 flights a week. However, the bookings have been so strong that they're going to upgrade that to 5 flights a week beginning June 1st. And then hopefully Aeromexico will come back in July as well. Delta has added back a second nonstop flight to Atlanta in June, and they plan to resume nonstop service to Minneapolis, St. Paul in July. Hawaiian and Southwest plan to resume nonstop service to both Honolulu and Maui after the governor lifts the 14-day mandatory quarantine for all arriving passengers. That had been set to expire on June 1st. However, the governor extended that to June 30th. So we're hopeful that we'll get reinstated nonstop service to Hawaii in July. And Southwest Airlines has advised anecdotal evidence that Sacramento is outpacing some of the other California airports in their network in terms of recovery rates. And I think that can be attributed to the fact that we're surrounded by a number of rural communities that have lower infection rates. And as these counties reopen, people want to get back to life as normal. So in conclusion, we're well poised for a solid recovery. The initial traffic statistics are encouraging. We're comparing our recovery traffic projections with several other econometric models, and we'll revise ours as needed. And the biggest unknowns at this point are the second resurgence of the virus in the fall. How long will the recovery take? I would caution that our transatlantic, trans-Pacific aspirations are likely delayed 2 or 3 years as a result the traffic recovers. And then the best opportunities for new short and medium haul service would be to sun and beach destinations in Hawaii, Mexico, and potentially even Florida. And so that concludes the slides, and I'll see here if there are some questions in the chat room.
Yeah. And Mark, we do have 2 great questions in the Q&A section.
Okay.
The first one was from Bob Rosenberg. He wanted to know, regarding Sacramento airport counts, how much is intrastate versus longer haul coming back?
That's a great question. Thanks, Bob. So actually, the intrastate flights represent about 35 to 40% of our overall available seats. So as California, the state reopens within the state, that's going to be a great opportunity for people to travel more frequently. I just went down to San Diego myself this past weekend, and the flights were about half full both directions. And to be honest, Sacramento felt busier to me as an airport than San Diego did. It was like a ghost town there. So that was kind of encouraging for us. So anyway, remains to be seen, but that's a great question. So interstate travel should be really good. And we've got great service with Southwest. One other caveat with Southwest Airlines is that by August 10th, they plan to resume up to 93 flights a day, which they had originally estimated 100 for July. So we'll be back almost at near capacity of where we were before. And that's with nonstop service to 22 destinations. So that hopefully we'll see the passenger demand to meet that capacity that's going to be out there.
Mark, I traveled this weekend to see some family, and I was in Phoenix, and I did also see that Sacramento seemed much busier for whatever reason. There were more activity, more people, so that was very encouraging. And the flights were completely full, minus all the middle seats. So yeah, really, really good to see people out and about. We have one more question, and then it'll be perfect. We'll be right at time. What changes do you expect in the airline hub and spoke systems, and how do you think it might impact SMF?
Well, that's a great question. Thanks, Bob. It really depends on the airline that you're talking about. American and Delta have been great in terms of maintaining service to the core hubs for us across the country. American plans to bring back Chicago service, but they have maintained service to Phoenix, Dallas, Charlotte throughout the crisis, which is great. Delta has maintained service to Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Seattle, and Los Angeles, and will reinstate Minneapolis in July. United has really been the most drastic in terms of their cutback, and right now they're only serving our market with 2 flights a day to Denver and 1 to San Francisco. Personally, I think that's an overreaction, and I'm hoping that they don't lose market share as a result, because we really need to see United reinstate those nonstop flights to Chicago, Houston, Washington, Dulles, and also Newark. And we're hopeful that as we're on the front edge, the cusp of this recovery, that'll give us some clout and some sway when we're discussing with United in terms of reinstating flights.
Mark, you've got one more quick chat in the last 3 minutes, so this is perfect. Robin Little wanted to know, how is the Fed money that SMF received doing? Do you have enough to keep things going?
Yeah, so great question, Robin. Thanks for that. Yeah, the Fed money that we got from the CARES Act, we were able to guarantee salaries for the next 6 months, plus also pay down some of our debt servicing levels. And so that really helps pave the way for the next at least 6 months. And as I said, hopefully we're on a positive, that trajectory of the positive recovery continues, and then we'll be able to generate. I mean, the big thing right now is that our revenue sources have really dwindled drastically in terms of parking and concessions, food, beverage, that kind of thing as well. So as travelers return to the airport, then we'll be able to generate more revenue in that regard and help overall for the way forward.
Very good. Well, this would normally be the part of the program where I ask you to give your guest speaker a big round of applause. So we'll go virtual applause here. I'm sure it would be a very loud crowd considering the amount of people we have today. Thank you so much, Mark. And a reminder for everyone watching today, these slides, again, will be available as well as the recording post-program. So now, thank you. Those are actually very reassuring figures, so it's great to hear. I now get the opportunity to introduce today's moderator for our panel discussion, Rico Rivera. Rico has been in the real estate industry since 2001, so he's seen it all. He started his career with Old Republic Home Protection and was a part of the prestigious Sales Leadership Club. While he was with Old Republic, he was a top producing sales representative. He averaged more than 300 transactions per month. After 15 years with Old Republic, he was recruited to manage the Keller Williams Realty Sacramento Metro office. As the office manager here, he managed the staff and more than 120 real estate agents. Rico and his office recently won the award for the Turnaround Market Center of the Year 2017. That is pretty impressive. He is very well respected in the real estate community, for obvious reasons. He served as the president of NAHREP, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, in 2014, the largest minority real estate trade association in the nation. He was one of the pioneers of the Young Professional Network, with now over 300 chapters nationwide. And he served as the president of the Sacramento Association of Realtors Young Professionals Network in 2009. So not only are you a busy guy, but you're a busy guy, you know, in all of your extracurricular activities. He's an entrepreneur and owns several businesses. He's taught social media classes all over the nation, helps realtors take it to the next level. And he is also on the Champion Steering Committee, which is why we asked him to join us today. And I will attest to, in addition to all these other things, he is one of our you know, most vocal and excited you know, champions and just evangelists of economic development in the work GSEC is doing. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rico, and he's going to introduce our panel and guide and moderate a quick conversation here to bring us on home for the balance of the program. It's all yours, Rico.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And for those of you guys that are still on, I want to say thank you for staying on board here. Hopefully you guys are getting a lot of information here. And so I want to introduce our panel, and their bios will be on the packet that you receive or will receive. So make sure you check them out on there. First, we're going to start with Michael Alt, Executive Director, Downtown Sacramento Partnership. Michael Jasso, Assistant City Manager with City of Sacramento. And then Ken Turton, President of Turton Real Estate, Commercial Real Estate. So first question for you guys. Let's start by having each speaker introduce themselves and their backgrounds and a little bit about what they're seeing in their respective industries as we begin to reopen. If we can start with Michael Alt first, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I've been executive director here at the Downtown Partnership a little over, almost coming up on 25 years. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the organization is a property-based improvement district. Property owners financially contribute to the economic development functions, and there's a lot of core services that we have in not only promoting but really championing downtown as a destination. And you know, over the last couple of years, we've been very excited to see a lot of the capital markets begin to look at Sacramento in a much different way, the investments and momentum that have come in here. But these last 3 to 4 months clearly have been a game changer for us. And, you know, as we're looking to slowly begin to reopen this district, the heart and soul of our district is the vertical office market. In the central city, we've got about 100,000 employees that, you know, make this home, and what that's going to look like as employees start to come in will obviously be much different. You know, we don't have the neighborhoods around downtown to fully support all the level of retail and restaurants that we have. So we need to be a destination. And so it requires bodies to be here, and people need to feel comfortable about that. We know there's some real caution that exists with this unknowns. We're hearing, you know, restaurateurs talk about some of the challenges related to starting back up are almost more difficult and daunting than some of the close down was, because of some of the questions related to how you can host people, what does the distancing look like, and you know, even challenges for many of our businesses in getting employees to come back with financially what they're generating in unemployment. And so it's a challenging time for us, but we're optimistic. This community has always had resolve, and we know that people are interested in seeing downtown and the urban core be successful. And so we're going to need to be creative, but we're optimistic.
Thank you. Michael, same question, Jasso.
Sure, apologies. So Michael Jasso, Assistant City Manager for the City of Sacramento. I've been here a little bit over 2 years. Have been fortunate to work with both my co-panelists for today. It's been exciting moving to California. Prior to that, I headed up the Bureau of Economic Development for Cook County, Illinois, which is the county in which the City of Chicago was. And part of that, the Bureau of Economic Development for the City of Chicago. So obviously, government is as affected in this pandemic as anyone. We've been working from home, working remotely. We are also seeing significant revenue losses. I think the challenge we have as government is that, as the City of Sacramento, is that we are rightfully expected to be a strong response agent at this time. Most principally, seeing how we can help our citizens and businesses both weather the crisis, everything that means, working with our partners at the county with respect to health, but even now, more importantly, figuring out how do we move to kind of mitigation and recovery, and what does recovery look like? And we're all doing that in an environment where that future and what that looks like is very unknown. So in some ways, we're going to kind of try certain things out. I think one of the things that we realize is that the sooner we create a sense of stability and safety, whatever the guidelines are, whether in terms of social distancing, et cetera, and creating an environment that our kind of citizenry feels secure in going out and engaging in economic activity, the better. We're fortunate in Sacramento in that we have a climate in a city in which we can take a lot of things outdoors. We recently launched some programs that are trying to do that, working with our restaurants in particular, where they can make use of public right-of-ways and parking lots to, in fact, more effectively social distance and get people outside. So we're going to be doing a lot more of that, trying to address, I'll talk a little bit later on about some of the work that the city council and the mayor in particular have been pushing. You know, we're fortunate that we have a strong leadership body in the mayor and city council, and trying to, with our citizens and our businesses, best weather the crisis.
Very good. And Ken, is Ken on?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, there, Ken. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm Ken Turton. I'm the president of Turton Commercial Real Estate. We're a boutique commercial real estate firm that has worked here in the Sacramento urban core for the last, since 2010. And prior to that, I started my career in the urban core at CBRE for 13 years, from 97 to 10. So I've been doing this for 23 years. And I've been through a couple of these different, you know, I guess recessions or economic, unstable economic environments. This one, of course, is different because of the impact of the pandemic or the virus, and its impact on people to return to a normalcy, even if we had a normal economic environment. And so what we've noticed impacting us was actually not something I think a lot of people really expected. Most of the people that we talked to in the industry, both from the lending side and the development side, and the investment side, and the business side, I think everybody kind of felt like this was going to be a 6, 12, 18-month recession that we would get through. There was more money in the markets. There was more liquidity than we had in 7, 8, 9. But the part of this, the derivative impact of this particular pandemic or circumstance is the mandate to shelter in place has basically accelerated the concept of working at home probably a decade. I mean, it's something that's always been bounced around a lot, and talked around, people doing these hoteling offices. Environments and stuff, and they really never do monitor performance. But now that we have the technology to monitor performance and productivity and time worked, and the security systems to sort of run an operation virtually, fairly securely, there was a recent poll out in one of the media channels that said 80% of the people currently working at home don't want to come back to work, and 82% of the people feel they're more productive at home. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. I will say that my wife falls into that category. She's a upper management for an R&D firm here locally with 300 employees, and right now they have about 65% of their employees working from home. And if you work in an R&D facility, Beckman Coulter, if you work in an R&D facility in West Sacramento, you don't have a lot of windowed offices, and you don't have a lot of food in the refrigerator or a lot of, nice comfy chairs to work, and choices of those chairs to work at. So when you're at home, there's a lot of these benefits there. Now those benefits, we kind of look at things somewhat myopically because a lot of us live in houses and some of us have kids and some of us don't. So, maybe people who are on this call listening in, some of those people are working in studio apartments and it's not quite so accommodative. But if you're living in one of those comfortable homes in the burbs or, in the surrounding areas or even in the downtown, midtown area, you have a strong motivation to stay in your living room working from home if you think your productivity. And that doesn't really even account for commuting, because some of these people commute a minimum of 25 minutes, as much as 2 hours to go to work, or 3 hours on a bad day. And for those people, it's not even a question, right? They definitely want to stay home. So this is really this has created a lot of uncertainty in the commercial real estate market. And uncertainty is a bad thing. It's worse than bad news. Bad news, at least you kind of know the general direction of where things are going. And so if you're a property owner or an investor, you kind of just basically use your experience and skill sets and your advisors to determine where you're at the curve. And if you're If you're up here on the downside of the curve, you can still sell here and buy here and make money in the market, you know. But if you don't know if you're on the bottom, even though you're up here, you don't really know where there is and what there is going to look like. You just don't want to make a decision at all. And that's the way lenders are feeling. That's the way investors are feeling. That's the way businesses are feeling. There's a lot of people out there looking for 2-year deals right now in the commercial industry. And candidly, 2-year deals kind of work for both sides of the table right now. If you know, because a landlord doesn't know where he's going to be. If he had to cut a 5-year or 10-year deal right now with a tenant, he'd probably have to make concessions he wouldn't necessarily have to make in 2 years. So it's to his advantage to make a 2-year deal, believe it or not. And then as far as the tenants are concerned, they're sort of in the same boat. They don't know if people are going to want to come back to work in 6 to 8 months, or whether they're going to want to continue working at home, or whether this virtual system's actually going to prove to be productive in a macro sense over the long term, or whether once people start getting comfortable at home, the productivity levels drop and they need to get them back to work. And so the businesses, you know, are happy with a 2-year deal too, really. So if you have a lease expiring this year, the lenders may not love it because the lenders are looking for stability and they want more than a 2-year deal in these buildings, but they'll take it over vacancy and defaults any day of the week. So I have a feeling you're going to be seeing a lot of these 12 to 24 month deals, sort of patchworking these lease expirations until there's more clarity and there's less there's more clarity regarding the actual vaccination of the virus itself, or potentially even a cure. I think once we have that, we're going to start to see stabilities in the markets. At the money markets, if you're watching them, are definitely indicating that you know, the people that have theoretically more knowledge than we do are highly confident that we're going to bounce out of this thing, at least from a business perspective, from a performance perspective, a dividend perspective, that we're going to bounce out of this thing actually quite well and quite soon. And so we saw the markets go down to 18,000, the Dow go down to 18,000, and the S&P testing 2750. It never broke those levels. Now it's back up to 25.5 today, and the S&P I think was over 29. So I don't think people are worried about companies being profitable, but for us in the commercial real estate industry, we wonder how they're going to be profitable. Are they going to be profitable with people working inside the facilities, or are they going to be profitable with people working from home? So that's probably the main thing. We can also talk a little bit about liquidity if you want, which is the lending side of the equation, and that drives the markets. But I'll just defer back to my other panelists at this point. I've already talked too much.
It's okay. We have a few minutes, so I'm gonna get to the next question, and it's for the entire panel. And the next questions, and if you have questions out there, please make sure you use the Q&A so we can ask those questions after we're done with our main questions. So the second question is, what are some of the roadblocks or pain points you are currently experiencing or anticipating as we work to safely reopen the economy? And if you can take about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, that'd be great, so we can get through all the questions. Let's start with Michael Alt.
You know, Ken mentioned it a little bit, and, you know, anxiety and, you know, apprehension, yes, are part of it, but this work from home model is a real challenge for us. I mean, there's a number of employees that, you know, that we have heard, especially these large vertical buildings that are really the heart and soul of downtown. We've got 10 million square feet of office space down here, and if you even look at half of those employees that, you know, are going to choose to work from home, people are having to figure out very differently how their offices are set up. You're going to have rotating schedules in many of the state buildings. We've done some outreach to some of the, you know, large Class A office space down here. They're seeing probably not occupancy above 80–85% until September, October. And so if that's the case, that's really a huge customer base for us downtown. And we're seeing that, you know, some of the basic quality of life issues that we've got downtown. Special events have been canceled through the summer. You've got the Golden One Center that, you know, has held off with events maybe till the end of this calendar year. But the models for how offices are going to be built out is going to be very different. You know, there's still interest in residential downtown. You know, think about it. Just a year ago, or even in January, we were at our downtown breakfast talking about convention center expansion, MLS, rail yards, housing, several thousand housing units underway, an expansion of our waterfront, and a lot of those things are on a much different timeline. We are going to see a slow roll as people begin to move back into downtown. We work a lot with Michael Jasso, who I know will be communicating with the city. I mean, this has got to be a destination where we want investments. And as investors are starting to look at Sacramento, how we are going to be able to navigate, I think these challenging times is going to be important. We know retailers, we've all seen the news in the last couple of days about restaurants that are closing, retail businesses. What are we doing to get people interested to come back and take retail? As businesses close, unfortunately, it's not as though there's a big list of people that are waiting to go into some of these spaces. And so we're going to have to deal with some short-term pain and be very creative with how we are communicating, especially from an urban core standpoint, that downtown is open for business. Employees that are going to be coming downtown need to feel good about that experience. What's being done to make sure individual office spaces, environments, even in these larger vertical buildings that we're in now, 2 people per elevator. And so, I mean, it's a much different lifestyle that we're seeing as far as that access. And many of the employees that are starting to kind of trickle into our buildings have been home for 3+ months. And so as they start to come back into downtown, I think we need to be very aware that this full build out of our consumer base down here, it may be through the end of this calendar year. And I think as Ken talked about, there may be new cycles and patterns that have established themselves during this cycle that may be permanent, and we're going to need to figure out how to deal with that. One last one, just as a quick example, we look to do things like farmers markets and concerts and some of these things that we have to do differently. And so we're even thinking, for an example, on something like a farmers market. How do you do an event like that if you don't have the workforce population down here to support it? At what point is there a tipping scale that you can do some of these things and provide it affordable for both the farmers to come downtown? And so there's a lot of unknowns that we're all navigating through as it relates to how we reopen for business and how we create an environment that people want to come to.
Very good. Michael Jasso, you want to add to that?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I would echo, everything Michael said in terms of pain points. With respect to our work as the city of Sacramento, I guess I would do kind of 2 levels. One is our pain points as an operating business. And like any business, we have customers, which is the citizenry, kind of residents of Sacramento. But unlike most businesses, we run the full gambit, right? We service needs for the young to the old. We have people that are savvy. We're kind of in terms, so we've changed our environment. So for instance, we didn't stop our building activity. We went through an online permitting, but we also have a lot of other things that require in-person presence, at least for some of the residents of Sacramento. Elderly, other people don't have access. So that still requires physical presence. And how do we adjust to the times, which is about social distancing? I think Ken is right, is changing the idea of being at home, et cetera. But we can't just be a virtual government, right? So there's things we have to do that actually require us on the street, meeting with people, doing all the things that are in some ways are at odds with, what this pandemic, has resulted. Then fundamentally for the work I'm involved in, working with Michael, working with Ken, many others in our community, how do we kind of navigate through this crisis and come out in a better place? I don't think the pandemic fundamentally changed the things that we believe Sacramento has to move towards to be a successful and growing economy. Everything Barry was talking about growing our tradable sectors. How do we kind of become a place that the young kind of see, particularly from the Bay Area, continue wanting to be here, et cetera. But it has changed how we approach it. It fundamentally in terms of those things. And it's also, what's also changed are the resources that may be available to us, at least in the short term, to address that. We shouldn't view this as just a crisis. I mean, crisis by definition is also a point of opportunity, but to the future is the fleet-footed, and so that's where we need to be collectively as a city. I think in the long term and even in the medium term, this probably bodes well, or at least there's an upside to a city like Sacramento as we move out of the crisis. But in the short term, it requires some real kind of fleet-footedness by government, by our institutional partners, our private sector partners moving forward. So, and that's where we're going to find ourselves in the next certainly 6 to 9 months to a year.
Very good. Ken, you want to add something to that?
Sure. Yeah, and it's a great question. Matter of fact, I logged an extra 30 minutes with my therapist just the other day talking about this very thing. And just kidding, but not really. No matter what the economic circumstances and ramifications are of this whole coronavirus that we're going through are on a regional level, I'd rather be in Midtown and downtown for sure, 100%, because ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to have businesses. You have businesses that are the whole is exactly equal to the sum of their parts. In other words, you have a lot of individuals working in individual silos, and there's no real integration or additional value through the integration of those employees. Therefore, they can work at home just fine. But when you get into professional environments like Midtown or downtown, and a lot of professional services and organizations, law firms, accounting firms, lobbying firms, then usually, almost always, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts by virtue of the integration of those parts. And in those type of environments, you have to have people together. And our firm is a living example of that. If everybody was working in silos, we'd have no sharing of information, valuable information. So a guy who may list a building that's for lease wouldn't know that the same guy in the same firm is running with a tenant for that size to fill that space, right? And so we are a class, and so is the DSP, and so is the city in many ways, although maybe not entirely. So I think governments in general, they'll have to look at it agency by agency. But by and large, if you're an information-based organization where the whole is greater than the sum of its individual parts, you're going to be fine. When you have small floor plates, you're in an enviable position, because even if there's shrinkage, which there's ultimately going to be, because all organizations are going to have some employees that fit into that silo that can work at home, and it's probably going to be a benefit for them to offer that to an employee to attract that talent. But ultimately, they still need an office. They're going to need an office of some kind. And so if you have offices from 1,000 to 15,000 feet, there's going to be offices that are 20,000 to 40,000 that are going to downsize right into you. But I definitely think as you see an increasing amount of confidence with the numbers associated with the coronavirus, and increasingly the increasing likelihood of a vaccination for the virus, you're going to see our restaurants back, rejuvenate and really normalize even. And again, we're lucky. We have the best restaurants in the entire region, right? As a matter of fact, our firm is kind of starting a little marketing campaign. We'll be working with the DSP and the Midtown Association. And basically it says, there's no place better than working at home except for Midtown. And so, or downtown, right? So that's kind of our direction, because it really, if you work like me, I wanted to go back to work day one. I love working. I love working where I work. I'm surrounded by great things and great organizations and amenities. So it wasn't a burden for me to go back to work, but I can certainly see if you're working in a big, large floor plate looking at a parking lot in Rancho Cordova, it could be more problematic.
All right. I just wanted to say that Bob Rosenberg does have a question, and so did Barry. So we're going to get to your questions. I do have a couple more questions for the panel, and then we're going to go to the Q&A from the audience. We do have about 10 minutes left, so we'll try to go a little bit faster. The next question, what do you believe will be the key ingredients for a successful economic recovery in the Greater Sacramento region, especially in Sacramento County? Additional small business loans, workforce training, etc. If you get either one of you guys can take it, or all three of you guys can take it, just be aware we have about 10 minutes left.
I'll be quick and save for questions. I think resources, we're going to need some resources, and keep in mind, these last 3 months have basically pulled the rug out from under a lot of these small businesses. This is the heart and soul for many of these, their livelihoods are in it. Many small businesses operate on such a small bottom line to begin with. They're going to need some help. They're going to need some help, whether it be through planning processes, financial support, but we need to have this customer approach attitude for them, that we can do everything we can to help them be successful. Housing, we need to do everything we can to continue to build housing in the downtown core. We don't go a week without somebody calling saying, I want to live here. As Ken talked about, being part of what's taking place in the urban center, and we should be doing everything we can to make it easier. We've got, still got a migration from the Bay Area. We, as prices have gone up here, we're still at a much more affordable, better quality of life than the Bay Area, and we've got to be taking advantage of that and building more product to allow people to come down. Sacramento is unique. We have incredible weather, and something special really was happening in the central city, and we will get it back. But we need to work with the small business community and help them get on their feet, because many of them, I think, are panicked at this point and trying to figure out how they're going to be able to reopen, and we've got to support them.
Very good. Michael Jasso.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously the council, so I mentioned earlier when we started, so the city council and the mayor, you know, have been positioning the city to take advantage of some federal stimulus dollars that we received. They weren't stimulus, they were technically kind of recovery dollars that flowed to the city, some 90 million. And we are trying to deploy them in ways that mitigate the harm that the pandemic has caused, but hopefully do it in a way that also kind of makes a down payment, as we were expecting to do, on kind of those actions that will pay dividends down the line. So when we look at small businesses, and we approved some $10 million of small business financial support, we clearly want to address, you know, kind of businesses' pain that we see out there, but also particularly pay attention to those that have the opportunity to grow as we move forward. Same thing with workforce development and reskilling. We know, one of the things we know is that there are going to be a lot of our residents who are not going to be going back to the jobs that they may have had before. So what does that mean in terms of trying to address that, but also address it in a way that's positive towards the growth in the city as we move forward? So keeping that eye on the future vision while still addressing kind of the needs we see today. We clearly, you know, don't at this stage have enough, you know, resources. We at the city are going to do what we can with respect to limitation of fees, a variety of other things, as well as financial support. But collectively, we need to work at this. We think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities. We want to engage and use this opportunity as a way of repositioning our older kind of retail corridors that offer a place to kind of live and kind of not just in the center city, but throughout the city, and kind of help spur economic activity across the city. Support for some major initiatives that the city has already been launching, such as kind of mobility center, such as the work that and encourage the continued work of UC Davis in partnership with the city in terms of the development of Aggie Square, I think is critically important, major industry initiatives. So to some degree, it's staying on the course we were already setting on, but we do need to address kind of the issues and the pain that we feel today too.
Very good. Ken, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I concur with everything everybody said. I think some special attention probably needs to be paid to the DOCO area. You know, I don't like to play favorites, but the city has such an incredibly large investment into that DOCO area. There's been so much work put into it, establishing that retail around there and just revitalizing that area. There was a lot of projects that are underway that will get completed, but projects that were just about to get started that are not getting started. Right now they're on hold, but that's a really, really valuable area to our city center and our city's future. And like I said, just a tremendous amount of investment. We can't let it burn down and start over again. You know, we can't lose all those retailers. We have to find a way to preserve those retailers. The city was given $89 million to work with. I think a lot of people on the call probably are aware of that. I think it would be interesting. I don't know all the parameters of how that money can be spent, but I think looking into how the money might be able to be leveraged would be an interesting concept too. In other words, you have $89 million to spend. You could spend $89 million on, you know, and parcel it out in different ways. But what if you guaranteed loans with it up to a certain percentage instead? So instead of just having $89 million, you now have, you know, $500 million to, you know, because in some form of a guarantee of, it wouldn't be a full guarantee, it'd be a partial, or forget, you know, but there may be something there that's interesting, and it's sort of and it could be channeled predominantly into employment incentives, and also business preservation. I mean, it's really, really important. And I also think that a lot of the focus has been placed on employees and businesses, and rightfully so. Of course, they're sort of on the front lines. They're the most obvious. They're the most, and they're also the most involved in social media. But not a lot of the emphasis has been placed on the lending and the landlords, the owners of these properties. And they're relatively small minority, right? I mean, they don't spend a lot of time on social media. They're not very vocal. They don't have big lobbying groups. So they're easy to be missed. They don't represent a lot of votes, you know. So if a couple, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them go down, you still only lose 5 votes, right? If you're getting reelected. But from an economic perspective, they represent so much more than that, right? You cannot let your best, these people who have a history and a vested interest, a true risk embedded vested interest in our urban core falter. You can't, you know, you have to support them in some way, and you probably have to do it through their you know, some type of mortgage leniency. And it doesn't have to be mortgage forgiveness. It doesn't even have to be forbearance. It can be something as simple as just going to those lenders, supporting those owners, and going to an interest-only loan program for 24 months. Because the principal balance pay down of an interest-bearing loan is generally about a third of it. So if you have a $100,000 payment, 33 is going to principal. Well, that can make a big difference in whether a person keeps a building over 2 years or they don't. So I think that the city getting more involved in these conversations with lenders that may not cost the city anything, other than maybe, again, say a 1 or 2 year guarantee of payments, you know, where you now are again leveraging that $89 million. I think those are interesting conversations, and I think they're conversations that may need to be had, especially in these vitally important areas that we've worked so hard to create.
Very good, very good. Now we have one final question before we go to our Q&A, and that is, how can the community play a role in supporting the region's economic recovery?
You know, I mean, we obviously need support. This is a retail destination. People need to come down. They need to support restaurants, support retail. Obviously, you know, we're going to be careful. We're doing things, working with the city to expand outdoor dining patios to allow for safer distancing, the alfresco dining that's here. We need to make sure people know that the city is open for business. As employees are beginning to come downtown, you know, over the last several months, we've seen things and creative things from restaurants supporting each other to takeout programs to these things. But we're going to absolutely need to support local retail and get people to come downtown. The employees that are going to be coming downtown are going to start, you know, we're hearing June 1st, next Monday, offices are going to start occupying down here. And we need to be prepared for that. And we're working with retailers to begin to open up. They're, you know, really trying to look at how they can run their operations in a much different capacity, but they need our support. And we, you know, must see Sacramento as a place to do business and to do business effectively. We're going to need customers.
Very good. Michael Jasso, you want to add to that?
Sure. Well, as a city, obviously, we are committed to the participation of all the city's residents as we look to what opening up looks like, what it goes forward. It has to really be a partnership, you know, of the city, business, kind of community-based organizations, and our residents moving forward. So for our part, being attentive to kind of the voice of residents is really important. That even said, it's also important that we don't look at things as aspirational. I think part of our role is to figure out what is actually doable, what's in the best interest, how to work with policymakers from the city, in terms of the city manager's office, the policymakers of the council, when appropriate, working with, you know, the county, the state, et cetera, to set the stage where we as the city can be supportive of the efforts that are going to come kind of naturally, organically from our residents and our kind of businesses and institutions. So I think it really is a cross collaboration of everyone in the city and beyond on the region. You know, the region is very important. This pandemic does not respect political boundaries. So neither do our solutions and how we think about addressing them. We really need to think about these things regionally.
Very good. Ken, you want to add to that?
So I echo all those thoughts, same thing. I do think that a lot of times we think, again, somewhat myopically, that you say, boy, I'm glad I'm not that guy. I wouldn't want to be a restaurant right now, or I wouldn't want to be a CrossFit gym right now, or I wouldn't want to be a this or that, or I wouldn't want to be the landlord of any of those things, right? But the reality is if you're in a given area, whether it's the Midtown area or the downtown area or East Sacramento or Roseville or Folsom, the value of whatever you own, whether it's your residence or whether it's your commercial property or your quality of life, it's all symbiotic. It's all tied together. And if it dissipates, if it diminishes, or if it vanishes, then the value of whatever you own goes down too. Whatever was there to create that value proposition is no longer there. So you are indirectly impacted too. Maybe not as bad as the guy who had it, but to a certain extent, or to a large extent, you're impacted potentially as dramatically if you had to liquidate for some reason. So I think it's very important that we understand that we have to bond together, so as a community, to support these organizations. There's going to be some of the sacrifice that's involved in making this work is you, even if you don't feel like spending the money to go out to eat, to spend the money to go out to eat, and even if you can't have a special event at a certain location, get the food, get whatever it is that from there, that maybe even drink, bring it back to your location and have the special event, but support these local retailers, because we do not want to start from scratch. It's a lot more difficult to start from scratch. You do not want these businesses to go out of business. In a more specific term, we need, as Michael alluded to, we need to get bodies back into downtown. We need to take away every possible obstacle we can and create every encouragement that we can to get people back into these offices. And employers are very good at their jobs, but they're not necessarily good at emotional intelligence and finding these intangible ways of making it more desirable to come into the workplace. So we need to do at least whatever we can to potentially make it as easy as possible to make them want to come back to work. So if being in an elevator on the 24th floor or the 14th floor, and you can only have 2 people in an elevator, is an obstacle, then you throw on top of that a $200 per parking stall surcharge, to come to work. Maybe we can't do anything about the elevator for the time being, but maybe we can do something about the parking charge. And that's what I'm talking about leveraging this $89 million. A lot of this is city garages too, right? So we have an invested interest in getting that income back into our city parking garages. Maybe we reinvest part of that $89 million into paying for employees parking in our own city parking garages for 12 months until we can reestablish our retail and the other type of amenities that made it attractive to come downtown. So yes, it's an investment. Yes, it's an expenditure of the $89 million. I think it still qualifies under the coronavirus implications. And yet it's a recirculation of funds back into our own city parking management system. So there's the ethereal component to it, and then there's the actual application component to it.
Let me go ahead and get one of the Q&A questions here. Rob Rosenberg asks, how will downtown offices work in the short term with the choke points of lobbies, elevators, break rooms, and maintaining separation?
Well,
we got about a minute before we got to go. So
that's probably a better question for Michael than even me, because he's in one. I think they'll work through it. People work through it. I think you're going to see mass. I think you're going to see more than 2 people in an elevator, but I think there'll be a little pushback. But I think people will live with it if there's 3 or 4, unless there's an absolute, document that's stated there. What do you think, Mike?
You're muted, Michael. You're muted.
It's going to be a learned experience. I mean, in our buildings, there's already documents and posters up everywhere, how to behave. There's, hand sanitizers everywhere. But I think, where it's going to get interesting is I think people are going to go through this. They're going to adapt. What's going to be interesting in these large vertical buildings is what to do if somebody in the building gets sick. Then how is that going to be adjusted and dealt with? But at this point, there's a little anxiety on the unknown, but people are going to figure it out. There's extra space marked in the restrooms on down. It's people will figure it out, but nobody knows totally.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your time, and we are out of time, so we have to move forward. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce Patrick Kennedy. He's the supervisor of District 2, Sacramento County. Thank you guys all. If you did not get your question answered, you do have more questions, please feel free. We will send a survey out. Please make sure you participate in that survey so we can keep having these type of events with these awesome speakers coming. I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Kennedy, District 2 Supervisor, Sacramento County. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rico. I appreciate it. And as you can see behind me, it's a hot day in South Sacramento today. I also want to echo my colleague's comment as far as apologizing for his hair. Unfortunately, mine looked like this before the coronavirus. I do want to thank our speakers and panelists one more time for taking the time out of their busy schedules to get on this webinar and provide not only important information, but hopefully some hope for the Greater Sacramento community. You know, the purpose of this program is to create champions for the Greater Sacramento region who can advocate for our region's economy and work amongst each other collaboratively to achieve a common goal. I myself am proud to be a graduate of one of the first classes of the Champion program. As we focus on economic recovery, it's more important now than ever for us to have these conversations and work together. Our region will not recover by working in silos. It will take business, leadership like on the GSEC board, academia, political leadership, and champions like you. Just by showing up today, you're all showing a commitment to collaboration, and I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to do so. And finally, I'd like to end with one more message. Because our climate and economy and economic prosperity are directly linked, our green economy is growing, and as Barry said, a tremendous opportunity for us. I'd like to challenge us to make climate great again. Thank you all. Stay safe, healthy, and happy.